Namaste. We are all live now on YouTube and Facebook. Professor Sajal Das is joining in a second. So here we have him.
Yes.
A very warm welcome to our very eminent speakers and panelists. A very warm welcome and pranam to Srimat Swami Sarvapriyananda, who is the minister in charge at the Vedanta Society of New York. A very warm welcome to Professor Sajal Das, and a very warm welcome to Professor Rahul Banerjee. We now start the program with the invocation. Before that, I'd like to warmly welcome all our viewers on YouTube and on Facebook. We have this invocation which I'd like to play. Please join us.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Gananantva Ganapatigam Havamahe Kavim Kavinamupamashravastamam Jyeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anashrinvannu Tibhisida Sadanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajeebhirvajinivati Dhinamavitriyavatu Vagdevyai Namaha Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine Avataravarishthaya Ramakrishnaya te Namaha Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme tayo shritva pranamami muhurmuhuh Namah Shriyati Rajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhasvarupaya Swami Netapaharine Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Welcome back. We have come to the last day of our 7-day yajna, if I may kind of say so, the National Workshop on Empowerment of Youth 2020. The theme of the workshop was character building for positive personal and professional excellence in Indian youth. And we had a very eminent set of speakers coming each day on all the days for the past 6 days. And we had a very engaging 2.5 hours. Today being the culmination of the wisdom that flowed through this program, we look forward to the day with the topic of the Vedanta and character building. We have Srimat Swami Sarvapriyananda Maharaj, Minister in charge of Vedanta Society of New York, who is going to deliver the workshop closing Benedictory Keynote address on Transformative Vedanta. Following his talk, we will have Professor Sajal K. Das of the Missouri University of Science and Technology deliver the keynote address on My Vedantic Secrets of Nurturing Character Development Amongst Youth. Following him, we have Professor Rahul Banerjee of Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics at Kolkata share with us his thoughts on Vedanta, Abhidhamma, and character development. Finally, we have our panel discussion with the topic on what works, the Vedantic secrets of experiential character development. We will have the closing ceremony starting at 7:20 p.m. with the vote of thanks. So we look forward to a very wonderful day today, and may now take the opportunity of introducing our most important speaker of the day, Pujya Srimat Swami Sarvapriyananda Maharaj. As I said earlier, he is the minister in charge of the Vedanta Society of New York, the oldest Hindu organization in the US, and This was founded by Swami Vivekananda in 1894. It's about 126 years plus. He joined, Pujya Swami Sarvapriyananda Maharaj joined the Ramakrishna order at the Ramakrishna Mission Vidyapit, Deoghar, Jharkhand in 1994. Since then, he has served the Ramakrishna Matan Mission in India in several capacities, including being the vice principal of the Deoghar Vidyapit Higher Secondary School. He was the principal at the Sikshna Mandira Teachers Training College at Belurmat. He was the first registrar of the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda University at Belurmat, and also an acharya at the Monastic Probationers Training Center at Belurmat. His videos on the social media, on YouTube specifically, have had million-plus views, pointing to his innate ability to connect his viewers to the most subtle and abstruse nuances of the truth of Vedanta. May now request Pujya Swamiji to deliver his benedictory address to us. Pujya Swamiji. Swamiji, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Namaskar to you, Dr. Mohan. Thank you for having me in this program. Namaskar to the other eminent speakers today. So the subject that I'm going to speak about is Transformative Vedanta. At the very outset, let me make it clear in what sense I'm using the word Vedanta. I'm using it in the sense Swami Vivekananda used it. So Vedanta is of course, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. But Swamiji, when he spoke about Vedanta, he meant, of course, the Upanishads, but also all the systems of Indian philosophy, like Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita Vedanta, different schools of of Vedanta. He also meant yoga, Patanjali's yoga, the practices of bhakti, and so forth. Broadly, all the schools of Indian spiritual thought which are helpful for our modern life. So he meant by Vedanta broadly Indian spirituality in general. Vedanta, of course, the goal is God realization or moksha, spiritual liberation. That is the purpose, the goal of Vedanta. But Swami Vivekananda also said that religion, to be effective, should be effective in every phase of life, not just for ultimate spiritual liberation, but should be able to help us wherever we are, whoever we are, wherever we are. So in that sense, Swami Vivekananda, he mined the treasures of spiritual insight scattered across our scriptures for thoughts, for insights, ideas, which would be helpful to all human beings, especially the youth. So today what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take three takeaways, three powerful insights which Swami Vivekananda gets from Vedanta, and which can be of special use, transformative power of Vedanta for the youth especially. So three insights or three takeaways. Number one, a high purpose or goal in life. Swami Vivekananda always insisted that have a high purpose, a high goal in life. Let your ideal be the highest, the most noble ideal that you have in life. Let that be your purpose in life. This is often, we miss the purpose of, what is the goal or the purpose of life. Often when we talk to young people, I have addressed students, school and college students. So if I ask them, what is the goal of your life? What is the objective? Often they'll be able to give me, can you hear me loudly enough? Is this clear?
I think, Maharaj, if you could speak a little louder, that will help us.
Okay. I don't know why.
Your microphone is, the jack, is it fully inside the jack?
Yes, I think so. Let me see if the
volume is a little low. So if you
volume
could
is low.
keep the microphone closer to your mouth, it might help.
Let me see. In the setup. It should be loud enough. Let me see. Why is this low? Is it still low? Is it all right? All right
It's all
now?
right, Maharaj. It's all right. Maybe nearer to the, and maybe you can point it the other way around because it's pointed down.
Usually this works. I mean, for here I'm seeing it's pretty loud. I don't know if the output is reduced at your end. Also,
It is clear, but it's a little low. But that's okay, Maharaj. Please continue.
okay. It also helps if if the other speakers are muted. I think then it
Yes,
works.
they are all muted, Swamiji.
Okay. All right. So often when we ask young people, what is your purpose in life? You will maybe they'll give you a nice lecture on what should be our goal of life, but what is actually my purpose in life? Often people are, especially students, are vague about it. And why just students? Even grown-up people. If you ask them a goal of life, purpose of life, they have nothing really like that. I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. But in day-to-day life, we never do that. If you go on a taxi and you have to, the driver will ask you where to, and you never say that, oh, just go on wherever you're going with the same way. You never get anywhere at all that way. We are very clear when we take a cab or when we take a bus, we are very clear where we want to go. And yet when we get on this journey of life, we don't seem to have a very clear purpose in mind. And that makes a huge difference. I'm reminded of that story where a man in a village, he's galloping on a horse, and somebody asks him, "Sir, where are you going in such an urgent way?" And the man looks back shouting, "I don't know, ask the horse." So you have gotten on the horse of life, and it is taking us somewhere, but we don't know where. See, this makes a very big difference. I often think about the monks in our order. What transforms very ordinary lives into extraordinary lives? And it's that we have a very clear high goal in life. If you go to Belur Math, our main monastery, and there you'd see from the youngest novice, the first person who has joined the order yesterday wearing white dress, to the senior-most monk, so who has spent maybe 60-70 years in monastic life. One thing is common to all of them. If you ask them, what is your goal in life? They'll be able to say very clearly. They have crystal clarity about the goal in life. They will say, Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya cha. That is the goal given by Swami Vivekananda to our order. That the liberation of the self, enlightenment and moksha, that and the welfare of the world. That is my goal. Everybody is very clear about that. Having a high purpose in life helps to transform our lives. It helps to concentrate our energies. What should be the purpose of life? Ultimately, the spiritual purpose of life is the highest. That is the conclusion of all the spiritual traditions of India. Whether you call it moksha or nirvana or whatever you call it, that is the ultimate goal of life. This is what our ancestors, our spiritual thinkers were very clear about. Ultimately, there must be some transcendent purpose of life. But there also must be some proximate goals in life. And usually, if those goals are like higher goals, which includes the welfare of others, that's better. One more point here is that when you set goals, when you decide what I want to do, what is the purpose of my life now, goal setting, this is an enormous literature in modern management studies. So one can take advantage of that. One simple technique would be that, yes, ultimately my goal is a spiritual goal and the welfare of everybody. But then how do I do it in my own life? What are the things, what kind of work will I do? What kind of study will I do? What are the goals for my personal health, for my finances, for my relationships with others? And also a time-bound thing. One exercise I found useful was if you draw 4 circles. The first circle will say, my year. So this year, what I want to accomplish, my goals. The second circle will say my month. So this month of that whole year-long target, what I want to do in this month itself. And the third one will say my week. In this week, what are the things to be done? And finally, my day. So today, what are the things to be done? So we have a clear, not only the final goal in life, but also proximate goals. What I do today and in the next few weeks, months, and years. Which brings us to the second takeaway. Not just a goal in life, but a great source of power in our lives is the power of focus or concentration. Swami Vivekananda said that the difference between an ordinary person and a great person lies in the degree of concentration. I have found this again and again throughout my travels. I always make it a point to visit a university wherever I am, whether in India or here in the United States or other parts of the world. I have noticed the best of students, the greatest of scholars, one thing that is common to all of them is this power of focus, the power of concentration. Swami Vivekananda, of course, himself had extraordinary powers of concentration. We all know the story of how his disciple Sharat Chandra found him reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, in those days, big leather-bound volumes. And Sharat Chandra says to him, Swamiji, it is impossible for one human being to read all these volumes in one lifetime. And Swami Vivekananda replied to him that, what are you saying? I've already finished 9 of these volumes and I'm on the 10th one. And not only that, ask me anything you want from any of these 9 volumes. And Sharat Chandra actually did that. He goes and picks out those volumes and asks from here and there. And Swami Vivekananda replied to all his questions, sometimes in the very language of the volumes of the encyclopedia. We know of another incident in Meerut when Swami Vivekananda was traveling with his brother disciple Swami Akhandananda. And Swami Akhandananda would go to the Meerut Public Library and get volumes of some abstruse scientific text in those days for Swami Vivekananda's perusal. And he would return the volumes and get the next one. The librarian was skeptical. He said, "You are not reading these books. You're just taking them and returning them." And Akhandananda said, "This is not for me, but it's for my brother Vivekananda. Whoever it is, he's not reading it." And when Vivekananda was informed of this, he came and met the librarian, and same thing again. He was able to quote extensively from the books which had been borrowed and read. I am told by a professor from Meerut that that library is still there, and on top of the librarian's desk, there is a picture of Swami Vivekananda. So this thing I have seen again and again. Extraordinary powers of concentration. One of my brother monks, one of the most intelligent and capable scholars that I have seen in my life, extraordinary power of concentration. I have seen him studying books in the midst of what you might call just chaos and noise, and is absolutely lost in what he is doing. Once he was reading a book, I asked him, "What are you reading?" No response. And when I went and touched his foot and said, "What are you reading?" Then even then he did not feel it. When I was not touching his body, when I caught hold of the book to see the book, he got a shock. And so that kind of absorption, the capability of focus, that power of focus, how do we get it? A lot of work has been done in positive psychology recently. I can recommend the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who has written the book Flow. He has studied how attention works, and he talks of attention as a function of challenge and our capability. The more the external environment poses a challenge to us, the more we tend to focus, and the more we have our capabilities. There's a match between the two. My capacity, my abilities, and the challenge forced. When there's a lot of challenge and my abilities are also high, then there is a state which he calls flow. Academicians, musicians, sportsmen, they have all experienced this state of effortless focus. We feel it when it's there in our lives. So Swami Vivekananda himself gave a very simple recommendation. How do you get concentration? Do whatever you are doing with the greatest possible attention, with the fullest possible attention. One might ask, I understand when I'm studying or working, I need the fullest possible attention, but why at other times? Suppose I'm just maybe talking with my friends or taking a walk. Why do I need to put the fullest possible attention there? He says that, remember, it is the same mind. You have only one mind. So the mind, if I let it run loose throughout the day, it gets the habit of being scattered. And then when I want it to be focused on my work, I'm doing an assignment maybe and doing office work, then the mind refuses to focus, but it's got the bad habit of being scattered. But if I had the habit of paying attention to whatever I'm doing, paying attention to whoever I'm with, then it gets habituated to attend to something, to focus, to concentrate. The third takeaway which I want to mention and conclude with that, see the power of having a goal in life, power of attention or focus. Many people have it. Just by themselves, they do not make a person great. I have seen so many people who have a goal, very ambitious, also very focused, but not very good people. They are not much good to others, and even unfortunately to themselves. Ultimately, they are also not very happy. By pursuing one's personal ambition, one may accumulate wealth or one may accumulate knowledge, but until it is of some use to others, it's not of benefit to others, it does not help one in one's ultimate spiritual realization also. So this power of unselfishness, that's the third takeaway. Swami Vivekananda emphasized this tremendously. That social work, not just by some people who are doing social activism or social work, but for everybody. Service as a way of life, as a component of the philosophy of our life, that my life should be of some benefit to others, especially for students. Swami Vivekananda, very rousing words and harsh words, he says, so long as millions continue to live in ignorance and hunger, I consider every man a traitor who, having been educated at their expense, pays not the least heed to them. I realized after seeing the struggles of students in this country, in the United States, that how much higher education is subsidized in our country in India, that when we go to college, and it's not entirely by your own merit that you are in IIT or in a medical college or in IIM. There's a huge amount of government subsidy involved. There is, our parents are paying for it. The contrast I see here, how young students, unless the parents are very rich, students here in universities, including Ivy League universities, it's very expensive. And students often have work 1 job, 2 jobs. They look for jobs on campus. They're working part-time and paying for their education. In India, often we don't have to do that. The government pays for it, and there are hidden subsidies everywhere. Our parents pay for it. So Swami Vivekananda recommends this sense of service to humanity. But at the time when we are students, the attitude should be, what can I do for you? It could just be your students who live with you, just your, the student community, the people who are around you. What can I do for you? Not just what I can get from you. I'll conclude with this core of spirituality. Swami Ranganathan used to say, what is spirituality? And he would say powerfully and simply that when I close my eyes, I find peace within. When I open my eyes, my attitude is, what can I do for you? That is spirituality. See, normally it is just the opposite. When I close my eyes, people say that when we sit for meditation, Swamiji, there's no peace, my mind is disturbed, so many thoughts keep coming up. And when my eyes are open, when I look at the world, not what I can do for you, but what I can get from you. And unfortunately, that does not lead to peace, that does not lead to fulfillment. Rather, it is when we reverse that my attitude in life is, what can I do for others? What benefit is my life for other people? And then only I find that my own life also becomes blessed. So these 3 powerful takeaways from Swami Vivekananda, these are transformative of our lives. having a high, noble goal, or purpose in life. Second, the power of concentration and focus. Third, the power of unselfishness, a life of service. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a beautiful message summarizing, distilling Swami Vivekananda's message for the youth. The three top points. And I sincerely really appreciate the way you put it. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are listening and watching and who will be listening and watching who really take away the three points that you put forth across: the power of having a purpose, the power of having the focus, and the power of being very unselfish and leading life there in that way. That's Transformative Vedanta. That's Transformative Vedanta by Vivekananda in a distilled format. May now go to Professor Sajal K. Das and introduce him. Professor Sajal K. Das is an example of what Transformative Vedanta can do for character building in a student's life, in the life of a human being. And let me take a little tour, or rather, shall I say, shall I put it this way? Like to give it little detailed way his own life and how he achieved his success. He studied in the Ramakrishna Mission Residential College at Narendrapur near Kolkata, a true Gurukul ashrama, known for academic rigor and strict discipline. And like many others there, he spent the most cherished period of his life in the beautiful holy campus, lavish green and meditative place in Narendrapur. And again, like many others, Sajal Das feels particularly blessed to have interacted in a very, very deep way, both inside and outside the classrooms as well as in the Bhavan. The hostel is called the Bhavan there, in the company of the loving and caring of the brahmacharins, the sannyasins, the teachers, staff, and the workers, who were always addressed as the elder brother. The enriching academic environment, the spiritual experience of Vedanta ideas and teachings that were instilled in him in Narendrapur became the pole star of his life as he progressed through his career, being a professional researcher in the world of computer science. He did his BTech in Calcutta University, Master of Engineering at Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, and a PhD at the Central Florida University in US. He has been a professor of computer science for more than 32 years, first at the University of Texas at Arlington, and now at Missouri University of Science and Technology. As a dedicated and passionate teacher, mentor, educator, and a researcher, Sajal loves to nurture young minds, primarily the students. Sajal Das not only mentors the bachelor's and master's students, the PhD and postdoctoral scholars in computer science education, he helps them reach to the goals that they set for themselves, the stars that they want to become. He believes in their total development as individuals, the man-making and character-building education that Swami Vivekananda so beautifully, eloquently set forth across for the students. Sajal Das collaborates with a lot of academics in the Indian universities. Interacting with students in India too gives him immense pleasure. And of his 44 PhD students that he has guided and mentored, most of them came from India. Some of his PhD and postdoctoral students and mentees are currently faculty at the various IITs. He is a fellow of IEEE and a holder of numerous awards of professional education. If anybody would want to know what character building education can make an impact in a human being's life, I guess Professor Sajal, the brief bio, if I may kind of call it the brief bio, is an example of it. We now request Professor Sajal Das to share his thoughts on the topic of my Vedantic secrets of nurturing character development among students. Professor Sajal Das, the floor is all yours.
Namaskar.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Dr. Mohan?
Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Namaskar. My pronouns to Srimat Swami Sarvapriyananda Ji Maharaj for a mesmerizing speech with transformative messages for the students. I had the opportunity to meet Sarvapriyananda Ji Maharaj on May 19, 2019 in St. Louis, Missouri, where he delivered an eloquent speech on Vivekananda's messages at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago in 1893. My warm regards to Professor Rahul Banerjee, sincere appreciation for Dr. T.S. Mahan for organizing this highly enriching workshop and kindly inviting me. I have been asked to speak on my Vedantic secrets for nurturing character development among students. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, as I have been passionately nurturing young minds, college and university students for more than 3 decades. With a student-centric academic and personal life, I hope my feelings and thoughts will resonate well with those of my students as well as students at large. It's early morning over here, 6 a.m. in the US. So last night, I asked my 20-year-old son, a third-year computer engineering college student, what motivates him and what does not? And is the motivation intrinsic or extrinsic? What inspires him? What brings him joy and peace? What methods he finds more effective for studies and creative thinking? And a few other questions. I'll just pick few responses from my 20-year-old son. Achieving something that is attainable, for example, a degree, award, or some recognition. Another response was feeling satisfied that made a difference, that has an impact. Family support is another aspect that motivates him, as well as social contacts with friends. He also said that he likes being challenged. And I'm sure these will be, or some of the questions or responses that I could expect probably any other student, college-going students, high school students, university students. Now, the synthesis of ideas that I'll be presenting in the next 15 minutes or so will be a culmination of my conversation with my son, in addition to observing and interacting with numerous students over the years, inside and outside the classrooms. Keeping in mind the theme of my talk today, I will try to bring out 2 facets of my Vedantic secrets. One, nurturing myself as a student. After all, we are lifelong learners. And on the other hand, nurturing students in the role of a teacher over a long period of time. In other words, I'll be wearing the hat of a student as well as the hat of a teacher. So the first point I want to make, the mutual respect and trust between the teacher and the student. In that sense, teacher and student duality is very, very important. Why mutual respect and trust is so important in terms of learning? First of all, there is no difference between a teacher and a student, because both have the same goal, which is learning. A teacher-student duo is complementary to each other, two sides of a coin. The existence of a teacher is void without students and vice versa. Therefore, mutual respect and trust between the teacher and the taught are quintessential to manifest the full potential leading to perfection. Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man, as Swamiji said. Indeed, Vedantic teachings have immensely influenced me as a learner, teacher, educator, mentor, researcher, and above all, as a human being. During college days at Narendrapur Ramakrishna Mission Ashram, we used to recite daily a Shanti mantra from Taittiriya Upanishad. Om Shahana Bhavatu Shahanau Bhunaktu Shaho Viryang Karabhavahai Tejasvinamadhitamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The meaning of this Upanishadic verse is Om, O Lord, may we all be protected. Here the we are the teacher and the students. So the use of we is very important here. May we all be nourished. May we work together with great energy and endeavor. May our intellect be sharpened. Let there be no animosity amongst us, no competition between the teacher and the student, but both are co-learner in the same environment. Om, peace in me, peace in nature, and peace in divine forces. The three aspects of peace: in me, in nature, in divine forces. So such a beautiful description of the relationship, the bonding between teachers and the students. We used to do this prayer every day at the beginning of our college days. Now, beginning the day with a prayer helps purify our mind, orient ourselves towards positive thinking, help us focus and concentrate with higher energy, as Swami Sarvapriyananda also mentioned. Moreover, today's students are tomorrow's teachers. It's a parampara. Only a master teacher can produce master students, who in turn become future master teachers, who subsequently produce more future students. So, let us analyze how do we describe a master teacher. A famous quotation about this, and Swamiji also has said in different ways, a teacher can never truly teach unless he is still learning himself. A lamp can never light another lamp unless it continues to burn its own flame. The teacher who has come to the end of his subject, who has no living traffic with his knowledge, but merely repeats his lesson to the students, can only load their minds, he cannot weaken them. So my teaching philosophy all along has centered around these two things. Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. A simple sentence definition of the profound word education, the total education. And then this quotation that I said about the definition of a true teacher. Every course that I teach, every semester, these two quotations will be on top of my syllabus. Although I'm teaching students from all over the world, many of them Americans as well. And I explain them the meaning of these things. And with that submissive attitude, we start learning. So the first message that I wanted to give, which I mentioned, is the mutual respect and trust between the teacher and the taught. Now, with that attitude, submissive attitude of learning with humility and modesty, the second message will be centered around that, the how to learn with humility and modesty. Well, let me first explain my experience, the way I nurture the students, where implicitly or explicitly the Vedantic philosophy is embedded. Because educating and nurturing young minds is my love and passion. My goal has been to help students build stronger foundation in whatever they learn, stronger aptitude and problem-solving skills. Prepare them for better and successful careers, but at the same time, being good-hearted and kind to others. The Atmano Mokshottang Jagat Hitayacha, for one's own salvation and for the goodness of the society. I have a good degree, I have a good job, I have a good living, I have a good family. That is the microcosmic aspect of the education, as Swamiji defined in the total education context. But the macrocosmic aspect is how to translate and transmit this knowledge to the greater good of the society in whatever way we can. Some people do on the charitable way, others do in many other ways. As a teacher, my responsibility, social responsibility, moral responsibility is to educate the students in the best possible way, to make them better human being, better successful human being. So I try to motivate them to think originally, out of the box if possible, while providing fundamental concepts and insights. When the students are trained to face challenges in the classroom itself, they learn how to be more creative. I sincerely believe that a classroom is an ideal place for mutual learning, a laboratory for exploration of and experimenting with true spirit of learning in the Vedantic sense, in the Gurukul sense. Thus, my teaching and mentoring philosophy follow a holistic Vedantic approach to developing students, young minds to the next level of excellence and motivating them to be independent, creative, and confident. As Swamiji said repeatedly, and we have heard in the last few days different quotations, different understanding of Swamiji's philosophy on education, on teaching, on learning, and character building among youths and everybody in the society. At the same time, I expect the students to work very hard. I set a realistic goal for them with performance assessment to make sure that they're progressing in the right way, but help them succeed in their ways. But I do not spoon feed them. I promote a dynamic learning environment that nurtures individuals with diverse perspective and cultural backgrounds to pursue higher academic goals with mutual respect, trust, dignity, and integrity. So learning with humility is the key. Shraddhavanam labhate jnanam. Following Ramakrishna Mission's tradition, at Narendupur, we were formally accepted as students through Vedic rituals in yagna called Vidyarthi Vrata. And through this Vrata, we were purified through Pancha Sankalpam, 5 oaths we had to take with Homa or Yagna. I'll mention a couple of those slokas. The first one, instead of going through the Sanskrit verse of this sloka, let me give you the English translation of it so that the students can relate. So what does this mutual learning with humility and modesty mean? So our first sloka was, let me take refuge in austerity, luminosity, shraddha, modesty, truth, absence of anger, sacrifice, steadfastness, which is also called dhriti, right course, speech, mind, the Atman, the Brahman. Let them all be established in me, all these qualities established in me. Take me refuge in this earth, the heaven, the intermediate space, and in the great soul as well. So through this Pancha Sankalpam, this is one of them, and I'll recite the last one as well. We were inaugurated, accepted as student in the Ramakrishna Mission's tradition. In addition to our curriculum, we had an Indian culture class. This was not part of the university syllabus, but this was mandatory at the Ramakrishna Mission, where monks, Swamijis, Brahmacharis, they taught us Vedas, Upanishads, scriptures, Ramayana, Mahabharata. Did I accept everything at that time in the same spirit it was intended for? No, just like all of you, the students, I was not mature enough to get the full grasp and essence of it. We did listen. We did give exams. There were awards for doing very well in the Indian culture class. But what I think the seed that was germinated in those early life at the Ramakrishna Mission institution, that has a long-lasting influence and impact in my life. And thinking back, I think my Vedantic roots were all germinated at the same time that I carry forward in my whole life. So listening to those Indian culture classes, even though I did not understand, or we did not understand the fullest extent of it in every sense, but had profound impact. So two things I talked about. One is the mutual respect between the teacher and the students. Second is learning with humility and modesty. So let me talk about the third one, which is very important, is sharing and collaboration. Sharing and collaboration with a goal to seek the infinite. So now why sharing, dissemination, and collaboration are extremely important for effective learning? It helps us grow towards total development in the external world, which is outer world, as well as the internal world. We call it inner world. The sharing and collaboration helps us rise above the ego and self-centeredness. I have lots of anecdotes that we can probably talk in the question answer time if there are an interest among the audience and the student. By sharing, we get more joy. At Narendrapur specifically, we were blessed to have the opportunity of an open environment for study, discuss and learn in groups with our seniors, classmates, juniors, as well as with the teachers in the classroom, as well as in the bhavana, which is a hostel. At Ramakrishna Mission Ashram, we felt the learning through collaboration is by design. It is not an aftermath. It's by design. It was embedded into our system. And this approach paradigm not only brought us infinite joy and bliss, gratitude and satisfaction, but also provided a mechanism, a practical mechanism for receiving help from others, as well as extending our help to others. There is nothing more satisfying than sharing and learning together, because the outcome, the knowledge gain, productivity, measure of success, which we all want, especially the students, is a vector sum rather than scalar sum. The sum of parts become definitely greater than the whole. According to Chandogya Upanishad, that which indeed is the infinite that is joy. There is no joy in the finite. The infinite alone is joy. But the infinite indeed has to be sought after. The last verse of the Panchashankalpam in our Vidyarthi Brata says, Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Shishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. This means Om, the Lord, that outer world is Purna, full of divine consciousness. And this inner world is also Purna. Now from Purna comes Purna. From the fullness of divine consciousness, the world is manifested. Taking Purna from Purna, Purna indeed remains because divine consciousness is non-dual and infinite. Om, peace, peace, peace. What a beautiful concept of infiniteness or infinity. In mathematics, we have learned in schools and colleges, infinity plus infinity is infinity. Purna plus Purna still is Purna, nothing more, nothing less. Infinity minus infinity is also infinity, which means the full remains full even after sharing, even after deduction. So that means there is no deduction in knowledge sharing, in collaboration. The fourth message I wanted to give to the students is these internal versus external worlds, which that last Purna, in the context of the Purna, is described, the inner and the outer. So manifesting our potentials is the manifestation of the inner and the external worlds. So in the context of science, to acquire knowledge, we first observe facts, then generalize and draw conclusions. Thus is the experimental nature of science. Similarly, the knowledge of the mind, the very internal nature of human being and of thought, can never be acquired until we have the power of observing facts that are going on within us. Now, it is relatively easy to observe facts in the external world because many instruments, scientific instruments, have been invented over the years for this purpose. But when it comes to the internal world, our inner self, we have no physical instrument. Yet, we must observe in order to have a real science behind it. There is a deeper meaning as per the Vedanta teachings, which is experiential in nature, experiential, which is also the theme of the panel discussion after the speeches. According to Swami Vivekananda, the science of Raja Yoga proposes a means for observing the inner states, internal states of human beings. And the instrument is the mind itself. The power of attention. Swami Sarvapriyananda mentioned the focus, concentration, the highest of the concentration, the attention. And when properly guided and directed toward the inner world, that will help us analyze the mind and illumine facts for us. The power of the mind is like rays of light dissipated. When concentrated, they illumine. This is our only means of knowledge, that is self-illumination, an awakening which can be regarded as the light. In the context, an important philosophical question is, in the human being, what is that light which illumines itself as well as illumine others. According to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, light of man is the self, the Atman, the Brahman. Now I'm almost taking up my time, so let me just try to summarize and conclude that how we can enhance the imagination of the students, we can spark the light in their minds. So the 4 messages that I talked about, targeted for the students, which are the keys to effective learning and education with passion. Number 1, mutual respect and trust between the teacher and the taught. Number 2, learning with humility and modesty. Number 3, sharing and collaboration to seek the infinite. And number 4, exploring the inner and outer worlds to manifest the true potential of individuals. Now, equally important qualities of a student, learner, and creative thinker are dedication, commitment, conviction, eagerness to learn, hard work, perseverance, time management, efficiency and effectivity, and above all, character building, being independent and confident. I'd be happy to elaborate on any of these qualities with my limited experience, with case studies of students that I have mentored and taught during the question and answer session. With that, let me thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. That was a beautiful summary of your own personalized personal experiences translating into action. The 4 takeaways are so very nice, and I look forward to a very, very enlightening and enriching panel discussion around these 4 takeaways that you have shared with us. We now go over to Professor Rahul Banerjee and introduce him. Professor Rahul Banerjee is very interesting. He did his BSc in Delhi University in science because he wanted to become a scientist, and he did it in the world of physics. Then went on to do his master's in Chennai, Indian Institute of Technology at Madras, and then followed it up with a PhD at the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, working in the world of protein crystallography. He's right now a professor in the Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics, Kolkata. Apart from this, he has been a great scholar of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Swamiji, and Buddha. In fact, he has published 3 books on philosophy, and 2 of them are pretty prominent. One is on Abhidhamma, the principles in theory and practice of meditation, and another book on Indian philosophy and meditation, perspectives on consciousness. With this brief introduction, may I now request Professor Rahul Banerjee to share his thoughts. I'd be happy to showcase his slides. Professor Rahul Banerjee. Are you able to hear us? Yes.
Pranam Maharaj, my greetings to Professor Das. Mohan, can you put on the slides?
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that.
So while Mohan is putting on the slides, in this talk, I want to introduce you to a system called the Abhidhamma. And that system at one time held a lot of prestige in India, but like everything else, it's not studied very intensely these days. So in these few minutes, I want to introduce you to the power of Abhidhamma and show you how it can be used. You can use it for different kind of purposes, for concentration, for character development, for the acquisition of traits. How you use it depends on you. But the Abhidhamma itself has a certain purpose, a certain intention. So what is the intention of the Abhidhamma first? And what is the Abhidhamma? Mohan, can I have the next slide, please?
I'll do that. 1 second.
Next slide.
1 second. Yes.
So the Abhidhamma is the third section of the Tripitaka, which is the Pali canon attributed to the views, the discourses of Shakyamuni Buddha. And Buddha composed the Abhidhamma last as a tribute to his mother. Now, the purpose behind the Abhidhamma is to experience nirvana. Now, that's a very big word actually. But before we go into that, it's important, Mohan also told me to talk a little about the Vedanta. Sometimes the Abhidhamma, people feel that the Abhidhamma is different from the Vedanta. Now, that's not very satisfactory, because actually if you examine the Abhidhamma, you'll find that some of the basic goals of the Abhidhamma and the basic goals of the Vedanta are actually the same. Now, just to show you that the basic goals are the same, I want to tell you that when I say Vedanta, what I mean are the teachings of Sri Krishna and Swami Vivekananda, Swamiji. So for me, that is Vedanta. And and Vedanta is a very vast system, and so is Abhidhamma. And so are the views of Shakyamuni Buddha. So India has spent thousands of years, or definitely 1,000 years, to try and understand what the Vedanta is. And many thousands, hundreds of years, or many centuries have gone past in trying to understand what the Buddha really meant. So in this talk, to actually focus our views, so when I say Vedanta, it means the teachings of Sri Krishna and Swami Vivekananda. And when I say the views of Shakyamuni Buddha, it's what is enshrined in the Abhidhamma. Now, this word nirvana has spun a lot. It's spinning in the sense because when Buddha spoke about nirvana, or when Swamiji speaks about Brahman, or Sri Krishna speaks about Brahman, or Ramana Maharshi speaks about Brahman, they have actually experienced it. But when people like me who have not experienced it start talking about it, sometimes what happens, it becomes speculative philosophy. We start speculating about it, what it is. And that creates a lot of confusion later on. So what happened when Buddha was speaking about nirvana, it was very specific as to what he really meant. But as later generations came on, they began to speculate about it, and that created a lot of confusion. So essentially what nirvana means in the Abhidhamma is that beyond this changing world of our inner emotions, feelings, the external changes, there is something which doesn't change. There's a reality which cannot be trapped within the matrix of space-time and which doesn't change. And so is that Brahman. And if nirvana is the object of Abhidhamma and Brahman is the object of Vedanta, then both their objectives are the same. Because Swamiji in one of his lectures said that Brahman and nirvana are the same reality. It's as if you are looking at the same reality from different perspectives, but it's the same reality. So the basic objective of Vedanta and the basic objective of Abhidhamma is identical. Because Sri Krishna at one point in his own homely way said that tie the knowledge of Brahman in the corner of your cloth and then do whatever you please. So if that is the case, the same objective is the difference, then the next question is, what is the means? And even in the means, Vedanta and Abhidhamma are also identical. So if the means to get to nirvana is cessation of craving and desire. That's the means. Next slide, Mohan. Can I have the next slide, please? So if you look at the writings of Sri Krishna, then you'll find page after page he's saying renunciation of Kamini culture. Now that means something very specific for him. And in the Abhidhamma, there's absolutely no doubt that if you have to get to nirvana or experience nirvana, then you have to regulate craving or wipe out craving or reduce craving to a minimum, or in the extreme, you have to remove craving completely. So now craving has three levels. There are three levels in which craving operates. See, now I want to tell you that, see, we have many natural desires which are part of our biological system. Like we want to eat, and then there's our biological desires. But what they are saying is not these activities per se, but the craving for them. When you crave for money, when you crave for sex, then that is what is completely distorting the system. And unless you can renounce this craving, then this experience will be hidden from you. So reverse ways, if you see, the Abhidhamma says that the source of human suffering in any form comes from craving. And this craving has three levels. The first level of craving is a biological craving. When we crave for sex, we crave for money, we crave for success. The second level of craving is what has to do with our ego personality. What says I? What says, look, I am an Abhidhamma scholar. What says, look, you know who I am? I'm a big professor. You know who I am? I'm very rich. This I, which Sri Ramakrishna in one place says, I and mine is ignorance, is the second level of craving. And this is a very subtle level of craving. See, if you have sensual craving, like if you want to eat something more than you should, that's a very gross desire. But this desire for success, this desire for fame, this is a very subtle craving. It's not a gross craving. The third is desire for annihilation. And that, that's when people become suicidal. They want to annihilate themselves. But this is a very rare case. It's a pathological case. But the first two cases it's like an epidemic actually. It pervades everywhere. Next slide, Mohan. Next slide, please. So if you look at the ego personality, I'll just say a few words as to what the worldly ego personality. See, what happens is there's a lot of confusion in the terms of the word self. See, what happens is when Buddha says, Buddha kept silent when he was asked once, does the self exist? And he kept silent. And then he was asked, then does the self not exist? And he kept silent. And many people interpreted it as if he was denying the self. But that's not true actually. Because in the same discourse, Buddha says why he was silent. And he was silent, he said that, you see, what happens is this person is asking me the question, the only thing which he sees is this worldly ego personality, the I. And if I say, yes, the self exists, then he will identify with his ego personality. And if I say the self doesn't exist, then it will create so much confusion in his mind. Where was I before I was born? Where will I go after I die? It's best to keep silent about it. But when Buddha says I, he's talking about this worldly ego personality. And he said that this ego personality, if you look at it very closely, then you find that it is a complex. It is not a simple entity. It is a complex, like Nirvana or Atman or Brahman is a homogeneous, simple entity. It's not a complex. But the worldly ego personality, the I, which we engage in the world, is a complex. And it is composed of many factors. I don't want to go into the details, but if you see, whenever you have this I feeling, there is consciousness associated with it. There is emotional formations associated with it. It has a certain emotional tone. And most important, there's feeling associated with it and perception associated with it. So this brings me about to, Mohan, can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, Mohan. Mohan, can I have the next slide? The next slide, yeah. That brings me to, based on the emotional formation of the ego personality, the Abhidhamma divides the mind, the consciousness, which is associated with this ego personality into two types. And this is one of the main principles of the Abhidhamma. And they call this Akushala and Kushala. Akushal and Kushal in Bengali, in Pali or in Sanskrit, Akushala and Kushala. Akushala means unskillful mind. So what is the unskillful mind? Mohan, next slide. The unskillful mind is when these are called mental factors, or they are called emotional formations. When these three factors are cultivated systematically by an individual, by a society, by a country, by any group or organization, then these are called akushala roots. So the first akushala root is greed. The second akushala root is aversion. And the third akushala root is delusion. And sometimes they can be very powerful people. They can be military leaders or political leaders who apparently are very powerful. And maybe they give their message in terms of hatred. So if you look at Hitler, obviously you would feel that he was a very powerful personality, at least to begin with. The kind of risks which he used to take. But what he was cultivating was enormous hatred, aversion to other communities, to other people. And finally, that is a disintegrating force. Any akushala root, cultivation of any akushala root is a disintegrating force. It will disintegrate the individual, it will disintegrate the society, it will disintegrate. So when something disintegrates, it becomes weak. So if you follow the course of the pursuing an akushala route in whatever form, then you will realize that if you follow it historically, then finally it will destroy, it will disintegrate, it has to. In contrast, there is the kushala route. Mohan, can I have the next slide, please? Kushala route is the skillful mind. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna makes the difference between the ripe ego and the unripe ego. So completely effacement of ego is a very tall order. Only Buddhas, Ramana Maharshi, Swamiji, Sri Ramakrishna can completely efface the ego. That is a very tall order. But if you have to live with the ego, then it's better you live with a kushala ego, not an akushala ego, the skillful mind. So what are the roots of a kushala ego, the ripe ego? Mohan, next slide, please. Yeah. So in contrast to greed, lust, aversion, and delusion, the kushala roots are detachment, love, and insight knowledge. So if you look at insight knowledge, you can see that it includes proficiency, adaptability, mindfulness, lightness, rectitude, which if you cultivate it will also contribute to your professional careers. Although the Abhidhamma itself does not make this the plain goal to make you successful in life, but any kushala cultivation will actually promote your career, will integrate your personality and give you a strong personality. So even if somebody say starts the weak personality and starts cultivating the kushala roots, then it will definitely develop and mature into a very strong personality. So now I want to tell you that the kushala and the akushala division does not divide the mind or the mental forces into two completely different units. Of course, they are different. No doubt they are different. But it's not as if they are completely watertight compartments, because you can, based upon kushala, you can generate akushala, and based upon akushala, you can generate kushala. This is very important to understand, that you can flow from kushala to akushala, and you can flow from akushala to kushala. How can that be done? Supposing you have achieved a very high meditative state, and then you review that meditative state, and it incites pride in you. So that means based on kushala, you have started to generate akushala. Let's say you have a very polluted mental state, but like a witness, you detach yourself from the polluted state and start observing the polluted state as a witness. Then based on akushala, you are generating kushala. Okay, so now whether you want to go to nirvana or not, whether you want to go to nirvana, next slide, Mohit. Next slide. You corrected, you anticipated. Whether you want to go to nirvana or not, it behoves you to cultivate kushala. See, this is not something which elite people do, or this is not something which very profound people do, philosophers do, or something which only sannyasis and bhikkhus and bhikkhunis do. It's not like that. Because, see, if you have a polluted environment, today the whole planet is getting polluted. The waters are polluted, the marine system is polluted, the air is polluted. And gradually this pollution is building up. The carbon dioxide content of the air is building up. So unless you do something, this pollution will simply generate catastrophic consequences. So likewise, if you have a society or individual who starts accumulating akushala roots and akushala tendencies, if sometime he doesn't clear it, this will accumulate. And after some time, it will have catastrophic consequences individually. It will have catastrophic consequences socially. So this is not something which people do because they want to have very high elevated mental state. It's something you have to do in order to lead a proper life. So the Abhidhamma gives a system of 40 meditations. In fact, that is what I want to talk to you about. These 40 meditations are very well documented and very well described as to how they have to be performed. And in the little bit which we have tried to, some resource material which we have tried to produce, we have tried to describe these meditations very, very simply. And whenever there's a meditation, there's different bhavas. So there's the Shanta Bhava. So the Shanta Bhava is what the Vedic rishis used to cultivate, the Shanta Bhava. You must have heard in Sri Ramakrishna in works Shanta Bhava, Dasya Bhava. So this Abhidhamma system is focused on the Shanta Bhava. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna once said that Buddha's religion is actually Vedic religion in one of its purest forms. So Shanta Bhava. So when you want to pick on what meditation will be good for you, then you have the selection of the meditation is dependent on a personality type. So you have to analyze your own personality type, or if you have to give this meditation to somebody else, you have to analyze the personality type of the student which you are giving the meditation. So there are 6 personality types: greedy, faithful, hateful, intelligent, delusive, and discursive. Now, greedy and faithful are correlated because the greedy clings to what is unwholesome, whereas the faithful clings to what is wholesome. The hateful and the intelligent are correlated because the hateful hates what is trivial, whereas the intelligent has a critical sense to find out what is the actual fault in the system. So they are related. In fact, sometimes you'll find that sometimes very intelligent people are very irritable also. So an intelligent is to have critical rationality, and critical rationality will always an actual fault. So the intelligent person finds an actual fault, whereas a hateful temperament finds a non-existent fault. Now, delusive and discursive are correlated. A delusive mentality, a delusive personality is someone who is unable to make up his mind, who is unable to focus on anything. So, based on that, next slide, Mohan. Next slide. Based on that, the meditation types are divided in the Abhidhamma system. So now, supposing if you have a craving root, so at one time in my life, I was really down and out. So, I thought that, look, if I don't really lift myself up, I'm simply going to crash out of the system. So when I turned to one of the things I explored was the Abhidhamma, and they kind of suggested that, see, this Abhidhamma system is like a suggestion. It can be offered to you. It's up to you to take it. So they suggested that these meditations are for these kind of. So if you have very strong cravings, then let's say death, body parts. If you have very strong aversion, then there are some meditations called Brahma Viharas, color kasinas. If you have very strong faith, then meditation avatars like Sri Ramakrishna, Buddha. If you have very intelligent elements, discursive, delusive, and so on and so forth. So there are 40 and it's great detail. So I don't think I'll have the time right now to actually go into these meditations and tell you. But I want to tell you that they are described in great detail, and I want to give you 2 instances, and then I want to stop. So the first instance is some students went to Swamiji, and Swamiji said that, look, I think you should meditate on death. You should think about death constantly. So one of the students said that if I think about death, then that'll depress me. And Swamiji said, yes, that's right. It'll depress you, but after that depression will go after some time, and you'll find enormous strength in you. Now, how does one meditation on death? The Abhidhamma describes in great detail, how a meditation on death has to be performed. One more example. One meditation which Sri Ramakrishna repeatedly says, at least in Kathamrita, is to meditate on body parts. Like, for example, what is there in this body? This body, it's made out of blood, etc., etc., etc. So why should we crave for the body so much? What is the need to crave after the body? We should look after our body, of course, keep it healthy, respect it. But what is there to crave in it? So this meditation has been described with extensive detail in the Abhidhamma. That how do you meditate on body parts? Sometimes it seems that the Abhidhamma is writing a commentary on what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. So there's many things and many other things, but some meditations, there are some warnings also for some meditations. Like, for example, these two meditations I said, which Swamiji also said, that these meditations will depress your spirits because they are negative meditations. So you should always balance a negative meditation with a positive meditation, and you should always select meditation based on the root, your personality type. So in these few words, I want to hold up before you the power of the Abhidhamma system. One. Second, I want to tell you that the end and the means of the Abhidhamma and the Vedanta is identical. In the middle, there's a difference in perspective at some places, but this difference in perspective is so technical that it's not meant for every one of people like us. Our basic problem is to eat the mangoes, to practice it and get the results, not to get embroiled in this kind of extreme technicality. That is the second thing. And the third thing I want to tell you is that the material, the resource is available. If some of you have any interest, then you can send an email to Mohan and we will see to it. Or you can, I also have my email in this, but you can send the email to Mohan and we'll see to it through through your internet or in some way that the resources surrounding the Abhidhamma system will be brought to you. This much we promise you. And if some of you really want to see what is there in it, because it's vast. So that's all I want to tell you. I want to tell you that know thyself within. There's no vikalp for that. There is no alternative for that. You have to do that, because otherwise, as we go down and the akushala propensities begin to accumulate in society within yourself, it can only be a catastrophic consequence. With that, I thank you. I thank Mr. Mohan for his excellent management of this program.
Thank you, Professor Rahul Banerjee. You kind of brought in a perspective of character development, Vedanta, Abhidhamma, the Abhidhamma being a critical pillar of the vast dharmic canvas that India has as an offering to the world at large. So on that note, I'd like to now go over to the most important part of our event today, which is the panel discussion. And the title of our panel discussion, the topic of our panel discussion is What Works? The Vedantic Secrets of Experiential Character Development. And I think if we are closely observed, the Swamiji had beautifully distilled the Transformative Vedanta and three major takeaways that Swami Vivekananda has been saying in so many strong words. Professor Sajal Das had done that in 4 takeaways. And of course, Rahul Banerjee had opened up our canvas to include dharmic systems which are similar and overlapping with Vedanta. On that note, may I now ask Pujya Swamiji. Swamiji, Transformative Vedanta has been showing its power, and yet there are so many folks who do not really get the hang of it. They do not know how to apply it, They do not know how to benefit from it. They do not know how to be the masters of themselves. Where exactly lies the problem, Swamiji?
Well, let's take up one issue. For example, selecting one's goal in life, one's aim or purpose in life. I can give you a practical example that it is often difficult to decide what I will do in life. Yes, there's an ultimate goal that God realization or spirituality can be the goal of life. But right now in my life, what should I do? What should be uh, my purpose? How can I do good to society? How can I make my life fulfilled? This can be a difficult choice to make. So let me give you a practical example. This young man I met about 20 years ago, Vinayak Lohani. So he has a wonderful organization now, Parivar, where he takes care of thousands of orphans and then does an enormous amount of social work in Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, feeding thousands of children, feeding indigent people, looking after education of the most impoverished people in the most remote rural areas. Now, this is what he's doing now. So in one gathering of young people, of students, somebody asked him, how did you decide that this is going to be your goal in life? And his answer is very instructive, which shows that what is the difficulty and what is the solution. He said, at first I could not decide. He was a student of IIT Kharagpur, and then he was a student in IIM Calcutta. So as a student in IIM Calcutta, he was thinking, what should I do with my life? This is what he told the students. He said, I was thinking, what should I do? Do I want to become a corporate executive in a multinational corporation? He said, see, I could not decide what to do. So I thought, let me decide what not to do. So this is a practical suggestion. So I said, should I become a corporate executive in a multinational corporation? My heart said, no, I'm not interested. So I look at my professors. Do I want to become an academician like that? And he said, my heart said, I was not really interested in that. Then one day he saw these children out on the streets, orphans, homeless, and he felt that they needed him. These are people who need, these are children who need immediate help, and he can do something for them. And his heart said, yes, I must go ahead and do something for them. And he just went ahead and he picked up 3 kids from the streets and started taking care of them. He said that from now on, not just a little bit of social work, that I will provide some money for their education or a school uniform or just some food. No, a complete total liability for that, that I'm going to take up their entire responsibility. I'm totally responsible for them, like parents. Until they grow up and they are able to live on their own, I will take total responsibility for them. So he started with 3 kids. And of course, now those who know, he has, I think, maybe 5,000 or more children who are. So that is one important takeaway. That suppose you cannot decide what is your goal in life, one way to go about it is to think what I don't want to do, and eliminate those options. You will come across something that your heart responds to. It will be different things for different people. For some, it might be academics. For some, it might be social activism. For some, it might be a direct commitment to spiritual life. Yes.
Wonderful. Swamiji, that is something which is transformative for the kind of values that he wanted to pursue in life, and he could bring it out in his life. But then I suppose there is this question that Pawan Kumar has, which I pose. What are some suggestions to practice Vedanta in daily life?
Yes. So, as I said earlier, once you have a goal, once you've decided upon a goal, what to do in our daily life also becomes clear. It is only when I do not have a clear goal, what do I do today, what do I do tomorrow, what do I do this year, that will not be very clear. So let me bring it back to the core of Vedanta. Ultimately, the core of Vedanta is spirituality. It is not even social work, it is not even academics, or it is ultimately spirituality. Swami Ashokanandaji, who was head of the Vedanta Society in Northern California many decades ago, in one of his speeches, he says something interesting. And remember, it was the Cold War era, 1950s, 1960s here in the United States. And he was saying that, look at these two great social systems here in the United States, the capitalist system, and at that time, the erstwhile Soviet Union, the communist system, two great rivals. It says one problem I find in both is that both are very materialistic. Whether through the capitalist system or the communist system, ultimately, even if you succeed at all, you will get a kind of material success. Then the question will still remain, what more after this? What will satisfy the heart of a human being, even after achieving some kind of material success in this life? And he says there, I think, the ancient Indian idea of moksha, or as Professor Rahul Banerjee said, nirvana, that there is something transcendent beyond this limited material aspect of human life. There's some ultimate solution to the human condition, the attainment of peace, going beyond suffering, attainment of lasting peace and happiness, moksha, nirvana. Swami Ashokananda said, even if we do not actually pursue it in day-to-day life, he said in India, majority are not actually directly seeking moksha or nirvana right now, but the very awareness that there is something like this in life, that awareness, which is very deeply lacking in these societies. Here in the United States or in the Western world, people are not even aware. People think that this is all that there is. One has to be rich, one has to be famous, one has to achieve certain things in life and enjoy some pleasures in life. What more is there? That's our ancient Charvaka perspective. There's nothing more in life. That leads to despair. That leads to deep unhappiness. After one has solved the questions of the basic necessities of life, you have got food and shelter, some education, a job, some amount of money. What more? If society does not offer anything more, then it leads to despair. There are people committing suicide, people becoming depressed, the high incidence of mental illness in these societies. It points to an underlying spiritual despair. So my answer to the question is, always keep God realization, moksha, nirvana, whatever you call it, that as the ultimate goal of life. And then look at your day-to-day life and see what one can do to progress towards that. Then the answer will become very clear. If you want to say, no, give me something specific. What should I do? Practical things in day-to-day life. So Vivekananda's formula is very clear. 4 things. One should have these 4 components in one's life. One is a component of knowledge, component of devotion, the component of meditation, and the component of service. So fill your life with these 4 aspects. You have the struggle of life. You have your personal life, your occupational life, your social life. All of those things will be there for everybody. But from my own inner life, there should be these 4 aspects: Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Raja Yoga.
Wonderful. So, Swamiji, there's another question, and this question is a question again for students. How can a teacher, Anuradha Bhattacharya asks, how can a teacher persuade the students to refrain from wanting or desiring in an effective way such that it will be instilled in the mental psyche of the students?
Always you have to divert this wanting or desiring into a higher channel. Wanting and desiring, you cannot stop it, and one should not stop it also. So always give a higher ideal to the student. So for example, a person is scattering his or her time in aimless internet browsing or aimless socializing with friends. It happens on college campuses everywhere in the world. Now, if we can install a love for a subject, a passion for a subject, then the students focus, all the energies begin to flow towards that. So suppose you love mathematics with all your heart. Now you're very interested in it. Now, for such a person, you don't have to give rules and regulations. You don't have to put restrictions. Just the passion for the subject of mathematics will bring a focus, a concentration to the life of that person. You see, a scientist, artist, creative person, they have such a high, their minds are so focused on that one pursuit, whether it may be writing a novel or doing some research in a laboratory. You don't have to give rules and regulations for them. This is the time you have to get up. This is what you should not do. This is what you should do. Automatically, that high pursuit will bring about a very simple and austere lifestyle. Automatically, that person doesn't have to practice deliberately that I have to give up these desires. So a high pursuit, a high goal in life. The highest is spirituality, but also even before that, Swami Ashokanji used to say that before becoming a spiritual person, one must be a gentleman. Gentleman, what he means is cultivate something higher, cultivate a taste for good music, cultivate a taste for good literature, cultivate a taste for reading philosophy, cultivate give some time for the welfare of others, not just my own enrichment. So people around you, good causes. One thing I like about the society here is that the culture of volunteering. So I go for walks in Central Park and I see so many people. They're not employees of the park, but they are just people who are volunteering just to clean up the twigs and the branches and keep the park nice and clean. So many such good causes are there around us. We must give some time, energy, money for something which is not of direct utility to us, for something that is good for others.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'd like to take it from there, Swamiji. You talked about the teacher having the passion, having the ability to instill the idea into the students, and how that in turn can really focus the energies of the students and not get distracted into wanting to have a frame like the rules of do's and don'ts. So maybe I should ask the two teachers who are here, Professor Sajal Das and Professor Rahul Banerjee. Professor Sajal Das, perhaps you should go first. How do you go about it? How successful have you been in igniting that passion so that you don't need to have the student to kind of desire and want and all the wrong kinds of things?
That's a very good question. And I think Swamiji has said eloquently, the passion, right? The passion, if you have the passion, then anything can be achieved. Now, two things that I'd like to talk about over here, back to your question, Dr. Mohan, that when you nurture the students and the young minds, of course, you want them to be successful, but I do not wait for the success to come. As what Sri Krishna said in Gita, right? Karmanne dhikarestu ma phaleshi kadachana. And I tell that to my students in every class as well, that you have the right to work hard. You should put your best efforts, and the results and the grades and your success will be a byproduct. But if you start thinking about the outcome and the result, then that's counterproductive. That brings you anxiety, and you are not able to focus with the highest level of concentration, as Swamiji said, to do the very best of your learning, right? So that's one thing, is that I think we should do our duties. We should do what we are supposed to do, learn with passion, without expecting the outcome at the outset, at the beginning, but outcome should come. Now, of course, this is a dichotomy, because one may think that why should I put my effort if I do not know what the outcome is? I also work in machine learning and artificial intelligence. We develop models, we do the prediction, but we cannot really say with 100% accuracy what the outcome would be. We can only say with certain certainty, with certain accuracy, this is what you can expect, right? So if you think higher education is like a black box, where the input of the students who are energetic, motivated, wanted to learn something, and outcome is the full-blown product, what they come out with it, right? Now, in between what is there in the black box is that method of teaching, that pedagogy, that role model. So when I say teacher does not have to be teacher in the classroom. Our parents are the first teachers. Mother is the first teacher. My family members could be teacher, a friend could be teacher, a neighbor could be teachers. Anybody who has the ability to spark imagination in us, who has the ability to increase our curiosity and inquisitiveness, they are the teachers, right? Now, of course, we go through a structured system in the schools and colleges where we learn science, we learn other things as well. So this learning with passion is extremely important. And I'll give you a couple of examples, which will be very mundane example, but very powerful example. So for example, let's say, you think about our school days. If I ask you the question, student, the question, okay, have you read any fiction, novel, mystery book hiding behind your textbook, evading your parents' attention? If they say no, then I'll say they missed a very interesting childhood. We all did it. We hid behind our textbook, a very nice novel, a mystery book, a thriller, a comic book, and we did that. Why did we do that? Because the authors created that environment, grasped our attention, that we could not do anything else without finishing that book first, right? We forgot eating, forgot sleeping, forgot doing anything. And that was the job of the author, good writer. Now you are doing that thing. I'm giving a very mundane example, but very powerful, that you're reading that, hiding behind the book, your door, you are in your room, your mom comes in. What are you doing? You suddenly close the text, that story book, comic book, and you go back to your studies as if nothing happened, right? Your mother returns to her work, and you do the same thing again, you repeat, you go back to your test, your passion. Now if I flip that approach and attitude, that if as teachers, as authors, as writers, if we become that role model, we create an environment in the classroom that students feel guilty not to come to the class. Because nowadays, there are a lot of opportunities for the students to learn, all online materials, all the slides, books. But is that learning? I think probably not. That may be true for a very small percentage of top students who have the natural ability to grasp those material and understand in their own ways. But often we learn from our gurus, our teachers, because teachers don't teach from the book, they teach from their experience. The teachers impart knowledge and perpetuate their knowledge the way they think this thing should be taught. And if the students feel that if they don't come to the class, they are the loser, then they'll come. Otherwise, in the classrooms today, I'm teaching, let's say 40, 50 students in the classroom. Nowadays, it's very difficult to catch their attention because they have their handset, smartphones in their hands. So you do not know behind the chairs or the tables whether they're attending your lecture or they're doing something else. Students in the US and everywhere else now come with laptops. What are they browsing? I'm teaching on one side of the room. Even though I walk around, I cannot really keep an eye at every moment what the students are doing. But if the role model is extremely important, right? And this passion is important. If as a teacher, as an educator, if I can exhibit my passion in the classroom without saying it, that passion should be exhibited in what we did, right? And if we do that, then students will be engaged in learning and they'll feel for it. Because if they know that as a teacher, I'm passionate and I enjoy, that brings me happiness, and that happiness cannot be purchased in Walmart or a supermarket, that happiness and peace is within, then they'll resonate, they'll feel the same way. If my teacher can enjoy, I can also enjoy studying, I can also enjoy learning. So what I'm saying is the simple things that one can do, be a role model. And the role model as a parent, as a teacher, and do what, as Maharaj said, do whatever you do in the best possible ways. Exhibit your passion and with full concentration, full dedication, and spiritualizing in what we do. Like as Swamiji said, work is worship. Dr. Mohan, I think you are muted.
I should ask Professor Rahul Banerjee, role models. if teachers are not up to mark, if they're not being a role model, and therefore if they can't ignite that fire within the students, how can the students then not be away from the distractions that engage them and fetter away their energies? How do you get the role model?
No, Mohan, I'll
What do
just
you say?
say something which Maharaj said, which is absolutely true, because it's the same energy
Yes.
which goes down and it's the same energy which moves up. So if the teacher can give a very
Okay.
high direction, can enthuse the student, then the same energy will start moving up. If the student is frustrated, then the same energy will start moving down. So sometimes the teacher succeeds. Personally, if you ask me, sometimes I have succeeded in enthusing the student, sometimes I have failed. I've had problem students. So that's far as that goes. But I want to tell you that in this age of internet and this and that, some desires are proliferating, and there are methods, there are psychological methods, there are meditative methods to counter these desires, but they have to be deployed with care, because after all, you have to be very careful when you're interfering or trying to modulate or regulate a biological drive. So if there's a biological drive, then that has to be modulated with care. See, if that proliferates in a completely uncontrollable fashion, then it is. And on the other hand, if you completely suppress something, that is also that will also have disastrous results. That's why Swamiji says that don't emasculate, because if you emasculate something, then you're losing that energy. It's the same energy which is going down and it will also move up. But there are some meditations which actually counter specific desires. And if somebody is interested, we can discuss how these meditations have to be performed. They have been discussed in great detail, but they have to be done with care, and necessary precautions have to be taken while doing it.
Wonderful. In fact, I would like to bring up the next question from Padma Priya Mohan. And this is a question which is for all the eminent panelists here, and specifically, I think, for Puja Swamiji. He asks, how does one prevent becoming egoistic and overly attached to the outcomes while still being ambitious and focused on our goal and purpose? Particularly, he wants to know, how can students be more mindful of this?
If I understand the question correctly, when our goal is not just personal, when it includes others, that my life should be of some benefit to others, whether it is a monk or a teacher or a corporate executive or simply maybe a housewife, how can I be of help to others? Automatically, the problem of ego is attenuated, is overcome to some extent when I'm dedicating my time, energy to the service of others. And it should be in the spirit of service. Swami Vivekananda says, let the giver kneel down and offer, let the receiver stand up and receive. So it's not in the sense of charity that I'm doing a favor to somebody. Rather, it is a great blessing for me that I get the opportunity of being of service to others. So when this attitude of service is there, the problem of ego is overcome to a great extent.
Wonderful.
I think.
Wonderful. So,
May I say something into this extent, Dr. Mohan?
yes?
Yeah, may I just make some comments over here?
Yeah. The question, if you want, the question is up there once more. So,
Yeah.
not to be obsessed with outcomes, but to be able to take up the focus, have the focus. I think that's the one phrase summary I could make of that question. Please go ahead, Professor Das.
Yeah, so I can give a concrete example of a student of mine who got PhD in 2002. Extremely bright student. He got his education in Presidency College in Kolkata, Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore for his master's, came to do PhD with me. He was very independent. He loved challenges. Any problem that you give him, you tell him a little bit, he'll come with a much larger expansion of the thoughts. He became the best intern among all interns throughout the world in Nokia research. You can see the level of thinking, right? But at the same time, there's a subtle ego that I could sense in him. I'll elaborate on that. So basically, what I wanted to push him to the limit, how much he does not know. So in the classroom, we teach how much students know. We test in the exam. We also give questions to test how much they don't know, so that they feel challenged, right? So this student of mine, I gave him a very challenging problem, open research problem. And he struggled for 5-6 months, could not make a head to it. And I knew the problem is very challenging, but I wanted to test. At that time, actually, I could see that he was breaking down. And he basically came to my office very anxious to tell me that, Dr. Das, I decided to quit my PhD. He was about to finish his PhD in another 6 to 8 months. And I said, what are you going to do once if you don't do the PhD? I'll go back to Kolkata. My friend has a car dealership and I'll take a job there. Just imagine. So I had to really, I told him that, okay, go back and let's meet tomorrow or day after tomorrow. I'm giving this story because it's a tangible story. So I could sense that it basically hurt his ego, that he feels that he is very bright, very smart, but this is a problem that he could not tackle, he could not solve. And that could be the source of frustration. That was my first symptom identification, diagnosis, right? So I talked to him for more than 1 month, almost like every other day, counseling him that it's okay to fail, right? So that's one thing. But what the story of the matter in a short summary is that ultimately he finished his PhD. He became a professor at the university. He produced his own students who become very, very successful. Now he's a principal scientist in Apple.
Wow, wonderful.
Right? So what I'm saying that, so that's the way. So question is, it's not that I transformed him. He probably transformed himself. Because as Swamiji says that we cannot change people. Change has to come from within. But my job was just mentoring.
Wonderful. Professor Rahul, would you like to take the latter part of the question? How should one be mindful of one's either the obsession part or the lack of focus part and the efforts that go in between the two? Continuing on that.
Actually, our systems, see, first we are asked to tranquilize the mind, and then we are asked to be a sakshi, a witness.
Tranquil the mind, I think.
Tranquilize, make the mind tranquil, calm the mind, and then be a sakshi, a witness. I think the Vedanta and the Abhidhamma are completely agreed on this. So mindfulness in itself is like being a witness to your acts. So maybe one thing which you can practice is that at night or in the morning after you finish your day, review your activity. Try to maintain some distance between what you're doing, between your emotions. This is actually a lifelong work, but you can start. And student period is the best time to start. There are many techniques which tell you how this can be done, both in the workplace and as a meditation.
Wonderful.
So it's possible. It's possible.
Wonderful. I'll bring up the next question, and this is again addressed to Swamiji to start with. Swamiji rightly suggested to channelize worldly desires to a higher plane, says Krishnan Venkateshwaran. But how to cultivate a taste for Indic spirituality in the young, given that their idea of moksha seems to be to achieve Videsh? He's been very, I don't know how to put this, but if youngsters just want to go abroad, that is their idea of what they want to strive for. How do you put that Indic idea of spirituality to the youngsters?
Yes, and it's not their fault. It's what the society is teaching them, is teaching us, that you must go into an engineering college or get a medicine degree and then go to America or Europe or Australia as soon as possible and earn a lot of money. And that's the goal. So let me give a concrete example. Just a few days ago, I was walking in Central Park with this young man from India who said, he was telling us how he came to spiritual life. He said, in India, I was not at all interested. I was just, studying very hard. He was a very good student. And then I got this job in New York. I work in Manhattan in one of the top finance companies. And I already earn much more every month than my father has earned in his whole life. And now I was thinking, what next? And I find no answer. What's the point of living like this? And so I said, I went and asked my father and my mother. So I've done all of this, and now what should I do next? And my parents, very simple folk. So they said, but that's what we know. I don't know the answer to that. We thought we will sacrifice. We will make sure that you get a good education, and then you get a good job, and then after that we don't know what is there. We thought that is the end of it. That's obviously not the end of it. After that, what is the purpose of life? Where will you find peace and happiness? Your own peace, your own satisfaction, your own happiness. So there's nothing wrong with studying well and getting a good job and coming to Videsh. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You can do all of that. But remember, that's not the goal. That's not the end of life. Once you do all of that, you will find immediately be followed by a vacuum with a kind of purposelessness, meaninglessness, and emptiness in life. And I see that all the time among people who have achieved that dream of coming to the United States and making it big, the big job, a lot of money and comfort and everything. And then, so that's one thing that needs to be told or shown to young people. Second, exposure to the higher literature, not just philosophy, but also the lives of great people, not just spiritual people definitely, but also people in the field of science and art and politics and social work. So life teaches life. One catches the fire by looking at the lives of others. So that's one thing. And also always appeal to this is a secret which we know, that you appeal to the self-interest. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be successful and fulfilled. And if you can connect the teachings, this Indic spirituality teachings, the philosophy, higher purpose of life, if you can connect it to personal satisfaction, happiness, fulfillment in life, that with this I will be happier. With this I will be fulfilled. Here is something that I can pursue for the rest of my life. And it will just make me happier, give me more contentment, help me to overcome the challenges and sufferings which are inevitable in every life. Then people will be attracted to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what's important is you're saying that experiential character development is an experiment which is ongoing, which all the youngsters should undertake and know that it is so in the global framework that what you experience here is what you'll experience there. If you have a vacuum here, you're going to have that vacuum there. So figure out what is the way out in the global canvas, and therefore this notion of having Videsh as a goal instead of trying to develop the higher purpose in life, that is something which that parents should think through. That's a beautiful expression, Swamiji. I'll come to Professor Sajal Das. Now that he is there, perhaps as a role model for pinnacle of Videsh success, if I may kind of say so, more so because he has been coming to India frequently. He has been interacting and collaborating with a lot of academics in India. What do you say, Professor Das? Been there, done that?
So I do not know whether I'm the role model or not. Role model is Swami Vivekananda, in my opinion. Role model is the Ramakrishna Mission Institute as a whole. So keeping the same thread as what Maharaj said right now, and also the question is how to instill the Indic values in our education system, in us, right? I'll tell you my own personal story. That when I was about to finish my PhD, about 6 months to go, so in December of 1987, I paid a visit to India because I wanted to get back to India, join an academic institution, build my own research program, train students over there, collaborate and bring the ideas that I have learned through my PhD studies and graduate studies in the US and do it, right? So I was in dilemma because on one hand, my colleagues and professors in the US are saying, oh, do few more years of postdoc, then go back. Then you start at a higher level of understanding the research and all these things, right? But I wanted to go back immediately. So my interest was to get back. So with that in mind, I interviewed and I had positions in IIT Kanpur, IIT Kharagpur. So that's one thing. But then since I was still in dilemma, so I went to Narendrapur Ramakrishna Mission. And I'll mention very profoundly over here. So I met Srimat Swami Suparnanandaji, who is the secretary of Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture in Gold Park in Kolkata right now. But at that time, he was the principal of Ramakrishna Mission College in Narendrapur. Right? So I went to his office, and he used to love me because I have seen him from his Brahmachari days, our loving Sattada. So I told him my dilemma, my contemplation. So initially, I thought that he will say, Sajal, come back and do it. Right? But instead, he basically asked me a question. He said that, okay, fine, that you want to do Desh Seva, you want to come back and help students over here. But have you thought about this? That let's say you have something in your mind and you want to get this type of environment. And I'm talking back in 1987, 88, when things were not as smooth as probably now in terms of technology, in terms of environment and everything, or whatever. But if you do not get the right atmosphere to cultivate your passion, your pursuit, the research that you want to do, if you are entangled in between lots of other things, for example. So that's the way he asked me the question to test myself. So what would you do? Can you accept that and adjust and do, right? So he basically asked me that question, and that gave me a backlash of my thinking process. Okay. Then he reminded me, Swami Vivekananda's this famous quotation, expansion is life, contraction is death. He continued, Swami Suparnanandaji, that if you want to do Desh Seva, if you want to do something good for the society in India, for the people of India, for the students of India, it does not mean that you have to be in India. Wherever you are, think about India, think about our heritage of culture, help people from in India, help the students, and do the same thing that you'll be doing, staying over here, no matter where you are. And that actually opened up my eyes. That cleared my confusion and dilemma. And you mentioned when you introduced me that I recruit a lot of students from India because that's my Desh Seva. And that's the way Swami Suparnanandaji instilled in mind through Swamiji's word that your feeling for India, your feeling for the students, helping them does not evaporate just because you are not bound to stay within India. Because many things are invariant of geography, space, and time. So take this eternal message of Vedantic philosophy, our Indic values, and then try to assimilate and apply in your day-to-day life and work as much as possible. And I'm trying just in a very humiliative way to uphold that spirit. That's what Anandaji told me.
Wonderful. May I ask Professor Rahul Banerjee, how do you inspire your students to also have a taste for Indic spirituality apart from work on particle physics?
Well, I don't think I've been very successful with my students, at least. But anyway, I tell them, I discuss with them, I talk to them. Some of them respond, some of them don't. It's
Okay.
like that.
All right.
But I really don't trust anything on anyone.
Okay.
If somebody asks me, then I respond. Or I discuss very casually. But I don't really trust something. If somebody doesn't feel a need for it, then what's the point in telling him repeatedly about something?
Exactly. So that kind of comes to a very important aspect of experiential character development through Vedantic techniques or Dharmic techniques. And that is the lack of trying to be possibly sensitive to the time pressures that people have. And this is a very interesting question that comes up. The question is from Sudip Das, and he says, how can one ignore time-based successful outcomes if it is tied to serving others? You need to be time-bound, I suppose. Imagine a world where everyone works for the vaccine, but is not bound by the time-based outcome. You need to ensure that the pandemic is cornered, countered, and eradicated. So the point, I think, coming out of this question is very nice spiritual techniques. One needs to consistently practice, but where's the deadline? Can I have a deadline-oriented, outcome-based Adhyatma practice? If I may kind of summarize it that way. Puja Swamiji.
Certainly, even in spiritual life, it is not a casual, indisciplined approach. One of the things that I have seen among the senior monks of our order is the meticulous routine, time-based routine that they follow. Day after day, month after month, year after year, same time to get up, time to do the meditation, time for study and chanting, time for work, time for devotional practices like arati, very meticulously. So time-based outcomes, specific outcomes, which sort of modern management language, can very well be applied to spiritual life, to one's work in society. But what I want to say there is, whether time-based outcome or not, make it a philosophy of your life.
Okay.
Ultimately, till the end of our lives, this is the philosophy that I will follow. My own spiritual development, welfare of everybody else, Atmano Mokshartham Jagathitaya cha, the goal of moksha, nirvana, God realization, whatever you call it, ultimate goal, and being of service to others. Specifically, if you talk about time-based outcomes, measurable outcomes, that's a good discipline. That's a good way to see that we are not deluding ourselves, that we are just not wasting time. It's a good discipline to impose upon ourselves.
So the discipline has to come from within oneself, and it should not be imposed from outside. If it's imposed from outside, it's a question of stress. If it's coming from within, it's a question of consistency and focus that one needs to have. I suppose I should ask Professor Rahul Banerjee, what do you think? How do you think we should respond to this aspect of time sensitivity that one has to have when one undertakes practices to transform oneself in our character?
Well, I think it requires lots of patience. See, I've been practicing, say, for 20, 25 years, but yes, I have made some progress. But can I say I've arrived? I can't say that. I have not arrived.
But definitely you left the place of start. That much
Yeah,
is
but
there.
I can say this much. I can say that these classical Indian techniques which they formulated, they are very, very effective.
Okay.
And you practice them regularly and slowly, they will definitely have effect.
Professor Sajal Das?
Patience.
Yeah. Professor
Yeah.
Sajal?
So I think the deadlines are important because everybody or all of us are not self-driven. So deadlines help us prioritize, focus, and get something done. Given infinite time, of course, anybody can achieve anything. But do we have the infinite time? Would you like to be in the undergraduate curriculum or graduate studies forever? Right? That's one part of it. So that gives us a focus. But it has to be done with devotion and commitment. Right? As Swamiji says, the 3 H's are very important: heart, head, and hand. I mean, I wish to do this thing, right? I wish to achieve this thing, but am I using my intellectual faculty or my abilities? Am I working hard enough, right? So basically, with focused attention, doing things with the passion, with the head, heart, and hand, that's very important.
Wonderful.
And I would just make one light comment over here in the context, the concept of deadline, how it is interpreted in a child. Our elder son, he has been hearing about deadlines from probably birth or even before being born, right? Oh, I have a proposal deadline, I have a paper deadline, I have to do this thing, right? And he would be asking me, okay, let's go to the park, let's play. And I say, okay, can I do it tomorrow because today I have a deadline. When he was 6 years old, he asked me this very salient question: Dad, tell me, how many times do you really have to be dead? So he thought that I crossed one deadline, I'm dead, that's enough. But we have deadlines, repeated deadlines, right? But this gives us the discipline, in my opinion. It's a habit.
Wonderful, wonderful. Bringing that deadline stress into focus, I want to bring up on a question by Rajendra Deshpande, who says, due to some negative energy around us, around sometimes our focus diverts to bad things. Okay, how to help ourselves and how to bring back the consistency of focus, because when you have deadlines you kind of tend to do the focus. When the deadline or the goal is that aspect of the goal is removed, you tend to slide back into not being consistent in your focus. Puja Swamiji, how does one go about keeping consistency of focus in a solid way, deadline or no deadline?
That comes from having a goal in life,
Okay.
a purpose in life. So whether it is God realization or scientific research or teaching, when one knows this is my purpose in life, there will be consistency in life.
Wonderful.
One may get, you may spend some time for entertainment, you may go on a vacation, but you know what you are doing in life. What is your philosophy of life? That comes from having a goal in life.
So the purpose of life is to find the purpose.
No, that's not the purpose of life. It is to have a purpose and then live according to it.
Okay. All right. So what do you say, Professor Sajal Das? Deadlines are just one aspect of the stresses that are surrounding people and a lot of such negative things that happen. So how does one go about trying to keep up the consistency of focus under such hostile situations, if I may kind of say so?
I think each of us, so there's a personalization to everything that we do, right? The
Right.
same Swami Vivekananda's philosophy, Sri Ramakrishna's thoughts, that we all read the same gospel, same complete works, but we assimilate in different ways, we apply in our own ways. So there's personalization, right? And having said that personalization, as even the physics said, there's a state of equilibrium for all of us, right? That means everybody has an equilibrium state. And if our passion, our curiosity resonates with that equilibrium state, then no matter how much noise that you get in the external world, you may be perturbed, but you'll come back to that state. But if that state is getting this happiness and joy by doing certain things, whether my study, my job, helping others, right? So I think resonating in that state of equilibrium is very important. And second thing is that the human mind, or that's the way we are wired in, right? That we always take the path of least resistance. Forget about the deadline. If there's no expectation out of us, unless we are self-driven, unless we have a goal and purpose that we know of, then often we don't even know what is our goal, right? So we do not even know how to calibrate ourselves and coming back to the stable state automatically. So the consistency will come automatically once we latch with that passion, we latch with our goal. And no matter how much we are perturbed, we are disturbed, we'll come back to that state, whether you want it or not.
Professor Rahul Banerjee, what do you say to the efforts to be consistent in one's focus? What kind of meditation should one do, perhaps? If I may, can I ask you that kind of question?
Yeah, you should have a definite program. Say if you're sitting for meditation in the morning or evening, there will be backslidings, there will be failures, but 6 to 8 I sit for meditation. That will help you. That discipline will help you.
Okay. So what you're saying is have consistent, disciplined practices, and what you do in between will also have the consistency and the focus.
Yes.
So here comes a question from a student, perhaps, and this is addressed to Puja Swamiji. Subhash Chandra Bhag wants to know, as a spiritual person gives his whole thoughts, feelings, and emotions to knowing God, how should the student devote his all to his chosen subject? It's reverse, I suppose. Students are expected to put their all to know God, and therefore the subject performance gets fulfilled. But here's the reverse way of it. Puja Swamiji.
And Swami Vivekananda said that secret of concentration is to do whatever you're doing with the fullest possible attention.
Okay.
So the idea, this is based on the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which idea I'm going to share with you now, is that we have a limited cognitive bandwidth. So he uses the language of IT to say that I think we can process about 120 bits per second, consciously process 120 bits of information per second, and that's our limit. So the more we take up that 120 bits per second and put it on one subject, that is called focus. So suppose I'm reading a book and I put 30 or 40 bits of per second, the cognitive bandwidth on that, The rest of the capacity is left over, and then it goes here and there. What is going on in my environment? What is some message coming on my phone? That's what happens. But if one focuses as much as possible, then there's very little cognitive bandwidth left over, and the distractions will not come in. I remember I was telling a group of students in a certain college in Calcutta, an engineering college, about how I saw the students in IIT Kanpur studying in the library. This was a long time back, about 10, 15 years back. And I noticed that the students were from the early morning till late in the night, hour after hour, sitting there with their books, focused on one thing. So one of the students there said, but isn't it boring? When you don't do anything else, you're focused on one subject and continuously doing that only and nothing else. I say that is the opposite of boring. It is actually a much greater struggle if you're doing a little bit of your assignment, a little bit of internet browsing, a little bit of gossiping with the friends. Then it becomes a struggle to concentrate. You've scattered your attention in many directions. But if one focuses on one thing, and like a laser-like intensity of focus, then it becomes interesting actually. One can get absorbed in something.
Wonderful.
So the answer to that question will be that minimize the distractions all around, and then put your cognitive bandwidth at 120 bits per second as much as possible into that subject, into the object of your focus, what you want to focus on. Could be a textbook, could be an assignment, could be a research project.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, on that note, maybe I should ask a quick question to everybody, because here is Swami Satyapriyananda asking a very interesting question and a statement perhaps. He says, when a train was repeatedly late, someone asked, why are the railways publishing a timetable if the train is going to be late? The answer given by the station master was to tell the passenger how late the train is going to be. My question to the esteemed panel, and this is very important, is we all have very interesting Vedantic secrets of trying to put into action for experiential character development. That's been documented in so many ways, perhaps, and we have so many masters around. But the question still persists. Why is these problems there in the first place? Why is it that human beings, why can't they intrinsically get to accept the reality that they have to have the purpose? They need to know how to focus, they need to know how to progress, and they need to know how to add value to the society and the world at large. Why is that gap there? Puja Swamiji, Professor Das, and Professor Rahul Banerjee.
I offer my pranams to revered Swami Satyapriyananda Maharaj. It's good to see him on the program. I think he's listening on YouTube. He, of course, knows the answer to this much better than I do. And he has been a research scientist at one time, and a very inspiring teacher and the principal of one of the top institutes of our order. He has worked in Narendrapur in our college in Vivekananda College in Chennai, and many other institutes. So he knows the answer much better than I do, but I think he just wants to hear it from us. So yes, it is a question of slow and gradual spiritual evolution. All of us want fulfillment and happiness in life, but it takes time to learn these lessons. It is not that everybody is scattered or everybody lacks focus. Swami Satyapriyananda himself is a man of great focus, of great intelligence, focus, and creativity himself. So not everybody can be like him. But over lifetimes, we are slowly evolving. That is the Vedantic perspective. We are beginning to gather our energies, mental energy and spiritual energy, and focus it towards the great goal of finding ultimate peace and happiness and overcoming suffering. Dukkha nivritti ananda prapti, that goal which is moksha. Aurobindo said life itself is yoga. He said that if you consciously practice it, meditation, then you can call yourself a yogi. But if you don't consciously practice it, you just say that I'm living my life. That life itself is yoga. So life itself teaches us these secrets of spirituality.
So what you're saying is that we need to allow life to unfurl itself, unravel itself.
No,
for
no, no,
people
no, no,
to
no, no. Don't allow life to unfurl or unfurl itself. That is a long and painful process. Much
Okay,
better to be conscious about it and be up and doing.
okay. So consciously learn from the environment around. Don't burn your fingers too much. Maybe that's a
And not only environment, all the teachings which are there, accumulated
okay.
teachings in our yoga traditions, what we read in what we are hearing today from Vedanta, from Abhidhamma Buddhism, from the spiritual traditions, from positive psychology. Learn these lessons and inculcate them in your life as soon as possible. Otherwise, the process becomes long and painful.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Swamiji. I think we have lost Professor Rahul Banerjee because of some connectivity issues. However, let me take a few minutes of your time to get to the end of this program, which is a formal vote of thanks, just about 2-3 minutes. And I'd like to kind of share that we have had a very great time the 7 days of yajna, if I may kind of say so, on trying to know what it means to do character building for positive personal and professional excellence in Indian youth or other world youth. So the it's been magical, if I may kind of say so, to see how the whole program came together. And just being a witness there, things happened. And I just want to confess that I'm so thankful to all the speakers. I'm bringing up their names here. I don't know how many of you would be able to read it, but let me share. On day one, on 16th December, we had Pujya Srimat Swami Balabhadranji Maharaj, we had Dr. Sri Krishnan Venkateswaran, and we had Professor Ravindra Kumar. On day two, on 17th December, we had Srimat Swami Sarvastanji Maharaj from London. We had Professor G. Ramesh from IIM Bangalore, and we had Professor Y. Narahari from Indian Institute of Science. And on day three, the 18th of December, we had Srimat Swami Bodhamayanji Maharaj from Hyderabad, Professor Shweta Agarwal from IIT Madras, and Professor um, Dwarkadasa from Samskriti Foundation, Melkote. On day 4, 19th of December, we had Swami Atma Shraddhanji Maharaj from Kanpur. We had Dr. V. Srinivas from Viman Labs, Mumbai, and Dr. S.R. Ramakrishna, the Vice Chancellor of SVSA. On day 5, we had Srimat Swami Yukteshanji Maharaj, who is the correspondent of Ramakrishna Vidyashala at Mysore, Professor V. Ramanathan from IIT Varanasi, and Dr. Usha Astare, who runs Yogakshema Trust in Bengaluru. On day 6, yesterday, we had Pujya Swami Sudhiranji Maharaj, the Adhyaksha of Advaita Ashrama and Mayavati addresses. We had Professor Anuradha Chaudhary from IIT Kharagpur and Dr. S. Balasubramaniam, who is the founder of NWEY, and he joined us from Mysore. And today, I'm so glad that we have Pujya Swami Sarvapriyananda Maharaj giving us the concluding Benedictory workshop address. We have with us Professor Sajal Das and Professor Rahul Banerjee. A very, very heartfelt, uh, heartfelt thanks to all of them for having accepted to come, having come, and having shared with us the important lessons of life, if I may kind of say so, that can be shared with the youth, that can be shared with the parents of the youth, because everybody is interested in helping each other to develop character, especially when individuals can develop the character, the society tends to flourish. I would also like to formally acknowledge the several well-wishers who have been, what do you call, helping the Vivekananda Janatana Trust in several ways. And there are several Swamijis of the Ramakrishna Order and Mataji of the Sharda Mat who have helped me in this endeavor. I start with Srimat Swami Harshanji Maharaj, who is the Adhyaksha of the Bull Temple Ramakrishna Ashrama in Bengaluru, with Swami Satyapriyanji Maharaj at Belur Mat, with Swami Mahamedanji Maharaj at Chennai Mat, Swami Paramashivanandaji there, with Swami Mangalanathanandaji at Bengaluru Ashrama here, with Swami Vedatitanji Mat at Belur Mat, And apart from them, we also thankfully, heartfelt acknowledge the support and the guidance that I got from Mataji Divyananda Prana from Delhi. We have a very dedicated team of volunteers who really spent quite a bit of their time. And for all the volunteers, a very big thank you. I would like to share three important names here. That is Shankar Ganeshan, who has been like the standby for many of the activities here. Professor Rajat Vasudevamurthy, who lent his voice to invoke the Almighty for the blessings, and Pawan Kumar, who was watching us over from the Facebook and helping us make things happen. I'd like to thank all the trustees of the Vivekananda Janotana Trust, Professor Yashwanath, Sri Ratnakara, Professor Arun Agrahara, Sri Venkatesh Narayan, and Gokulmuthu Narayan Swami. We also have our well-wishers, Sri MP Kumar, Dr. Rajshekhar, Sri Kasturi Ranga, and of course, a very important person whom I'll describe, the incredible lover of truth, or maybe I should say, the person who revels in the joy of loving truth. And he has been a kind of a pillar for making this event happen, starting on dot, stopping on time, and also ensuring that things happen throughout this program properly. The lover of truth. To him, koti koti pranams. And finally, I'd also like to bring up that we had 650 registered participants. If you look at this Google form, 650 registered participants for this program. And I suppose many of them are going to watch these videos offline, and they're going to respond to the journaling their workshop diary every day. And to those who have done it, a big, big thank you. And on that note, we come to the end of this vote of thanks. And I'd like to share that all of you, all the viewers who have come live every day, you all have made it. And without you viewers, it's not there. So this is a program, it's an offering to all the youth of all parts of the world, and specifically to the part that's called India, so that we as human beings can live up to the exhortations of Swami Vivekananda in becoming better human beings and serving the society at large. So on that note, let me kind of share that we will have a request to Puja Swamiji to lead us in the Jaikara. And after the Jaikara, I'd like to share that this programs will continue. We are at the fag end of this year's program of the National Workshop on Empowerment of Youth. The next year will unfold, and hopefully we will have a much, much better year, a more happy year, more healthy year, more safe year. Puja Swamiji.
So Dr. T.S. Mohan, may I just say one word before Swamiji starts the Jayakara, if you don't mind?
Okay, please go ahead.
So since the last question was from Swami Sarvapriyananda ji, our beloved Mohanda, so I'll just mention one thing, that I have known him from my Narendrapur days, and I have been in touch with him. In fact, when you invited me on December 1st, I felt entangled between two Mohans, Dr. T.S. Mohan and our beloved Mohanda, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. So I wanted to thank him at the beginning, but let me take this opportunity to do that, for keeping in touch, for giving us all the guidance and everything as a student and beyond.
I
And
think the word entangled is
ji,
wrong.
very nice to meet you again.
Yes, the word entangled is wrong. I am just offering my service, my seva to the community at large. And in this seva, I think Srimat Swami Satyapriyanji Maharaj was a big pillar. And maybe you got caught in between, but not entangled in between. All right, on that note, may I now request Pujya Swami Sarvapriyanji Maharaj. Maharaj, your benedictory words and Jaikara.
जय श्री गुरु महाराज जी की जय, जय महामाई की जय, जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम तत्सत। Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
And I'd like to add to the Jaikara, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, Vande Mataram, Jai Hind. Thank you all so much. We will again come back to this platform at a later point of time. Thank you all for being part of the 7-day Yajna. Thank you.